Most people don't lose control because they're weak. They lose control because they're unaware. Control in communication isn't about dominance. It's about regulation. It's about who stays grounded when the moment gets tense. The first mistake is reacting emotionally. The moment someone presses your buttons and you react, control shifts. Your words may be correct, but your energy gives you away. Raised tone, rushed speech, sharp replies, they all signal the same thing. Something got under your skin. And once that happens, the other person is no longer listening to your message. They're watching your reaction. Emotion doesn't make your point stronger. It makes it negotiable. When you respond from emotion, you invite the other person to push further, question more, and test limits. Calm doesn't mean passive. Calm means unshakable. The person who stays steady controls the pace, the direction, and the outcome of the conversation. The second mistake is over-explaining. Over-explaining feels like clarity, but it often sounds like uncertainty. When you give too many reasons, too much backstory, too many justifications, you hand the other person something to argue with. Control weakens the moment your words start sounding like a defense. Strong communication is simple. It's direct. It ends cleanly. You don't need to convince people who are committed to misunderstanding you. The more you explain, the more you imply that approval is required. And control is never borrowed, it's held. Say what needs to be said, then stop. The third mistake is filling silence. Silence makes people uncomfortable. That discomfort causes most people to talk too much, clarify unnecessarily, or walk back what they just said. And that's where control quietly slips away. Silence is not empty. Silence is pressure. It forces the other person to process. It gives your words weight. When you rush to fill silence, you reduce the impact of what you just said. When you hold it, you let it land strong. Communicators are not afraid of quiet moments. They understand that silence often speaks louder than explanation. Another mistake that costs control is defending instead of directing. When someone challenges you and you immediately defend, you accept their frame. You allow them to define the conversation. Direction keeps control. Defense hands it over. You don't need to argue every assumption placed on you. You can redirect, restate, or simply decline the path altogether. Control comes from choosing where the conversation goes, not reacting to where someone tries to drag it. Tone is another silent leak. You may choose the right words, but if your tone wavers, apologizes unnecessarily, or tightens under pressure, people feel it. Tone teaches people how seriously to take you. A steady tone communicates confidence without needing to announce it. Control is sensed before it's understood. And finally, many people forget this truth. Control is felt, not announced. The moment you try to prove control, you've already lost it. Control shows up as calm presence, clear boundaries, and deliberate speech. It doesn't rush. It doesn't chase validation. It doesn't argue to be heard. If you want control in conversations, stop trying to win them. Start regulating yourself inside them. When your emotions are steady, your words become powerful. When your words are simple, your presence becomes undeniable. Control isn't about saying more. It's about needing less. And once you understand that, conversations stop controlling you. You start leading them. Reacting emotionally feels natural, almost automatic. Someone says something sharp, dismissive, or unfair, and your body responds before your mind has time to catch up. Your heart rate increases, your voice tightens, and your words come out faster than you intended. In that moment, it can feel powerful to react, to push back, to let the other person know you won't be disrespected. But what often goes unnoticed is what you give away when you do that. Emotional reactions may feel justified, but they quietly hand control to the other person. Control in communication isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about not being ruled by it. The instant your emotions take the lead, your focus shifts from clarity to defense. You stop choosing your words and start releasing them. And once that happens, the conversation is no longer guided by intention, but by impulse. The other person may not even need to make a strong point anymore. They've already gained leverage simply by provoking a response. When you react emotionally, you reveal where you're vulnerable. You show which comments affect you, which topics unsettle you, and where your boundaries feel shaky. This information gives the other person power. even if they didn't consciously seek it. Humans instinctively notice emotional shifts. A raised tone, a rushed explanation, or visible frustration signals that something landed. And when something lands, it can be pressed again. Another cost of emotional reaction is that it changes how your message is received. Even if what you're saying is valid, the emotion attached to it can overshadow the meaning. People stop listening to understand and start listening to respond. Your words lose precision because the emotion becomes the headline. Calm communication keeps the message in focus. Emotional reaction shifts attention to the delivery. There's also a subtle psychological shift that happens when you react. You move from leading the interaction to following it. The other person sets the pace, the topic, and the emotional tone, and you respond to it. Control, however, comes from regulation. It comes from staying centered while the environment tries to pull you off balance. The person who remains grounded naturally becomes the anchor in the room. Many people believe that showing emotion proves strength or authenticity. In reality, strength in communication often looks quiet. It looks like restraint. It looks like choosing not to say the first thing that comes to mind, but the right thing. Authenticity doesn't require emotional exposure in every moment. Sometimes, authenticity is the discipline to pause and respond with intention. Emotional reactions also limit your options. When you react, your choices narrow. You're more likely to defend, justify, or escalate. Calmness, on the other hand, keeps doors open. It allows you to redirect the conversation, set boundaries cleanly, or disengage altogether. Control is not about winning the moment. It's about preserving your position within it. There's a physical component to this as well. Emotional reactions activate the body's stress response. Breathing becomes shallow, muscles tense, and thinking becomes less flexible. In that state, it's harder to listen, adapt, or read the room accurately. Calm responses keep your nervous system regulated, which keeps your mind clear. A clear mind leads to deliberate speech, and deliberate speech commands respect. Over time, patterns form. If people see that they can provoke an emotional response from you, they may do it again, consciously or unconsciously, not out of cruelty, but because the reaction creates engagement. Emotional energy feeds interaction. When that energy is removed, the behavior often loses its appeal. Calm responses don't reward provocation. This doesn't mean becoming cold or detached. It means choosing composure over impulse. It means recognizing that not every comment deserves your emotional investment. Silence, a pause, or a measured response can communicate far more authority than an immediate reaction ever could. Learning not to react emotionally is a practice, not a switch. It starts with awareness, noticing the surge, feeling the urge to respond quickly, and choosing, even for a moment, to slow down. That pause is where control lives. When you stop reacting emotionally, you stop handing the steering wheel to others. You reclaim your ability to choose how the conversation unfolds. Your words become cleaner. Your presence becomes steadier. And people begin to feel that steadiness, even if they can't explain it. In the end, control isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about mastering it. The more regulated you are, the less influence others have over your responses. And when your responses are yours to choose, communication stops being a battleground and becomes a space where you lead with calm authority. Over-explaining often feels like the responsible thing to do. You want to be understood. You want to avoid conflict. You want to make sure no one misreads your intention. So you add more words, more context, more reasoning. What begins as clarity slowly turns into justification. And without realizing it, your position starts to weaken. The instinct to over-explain usually comes from good intentions. But communication isn't judged by intention. It's judged by perception. When you explain beyond what's necessary, you shift the frame of the conversation. Instead of stating a position, you appear to defend it. And the moment you defend, you imply that your position requires approval. Strong communication is efficient. It delivers the message and stops. Over-explaining does the opposite. It creates openings. Every extra sentence gives the other person something to question, challenge, or twist. What was once clear becomes negotiable. Control doesn't disappear all at once, it erodes through excess. Over-explaining also reveals internal doubt. Even if you feel confident inside, too many words can signal uncertainty. People don't only listen to what you say, they listen to how much you say. When your message keeps expanding, it suggests that you're unsure whether the original statement can stand on its own. That perception alone can invite pushback. Another hidden cost of over-explaining is loss of authority. Authority in communication comes from decisiveness. It comes from knowing when a point is complete. When you keep talking past that point, you move from leading the conversation to chasing understanding. The listener senses the shift and often takes control of the direction. There is also a power imbalance created by over-explaining. You place the other person in the role of judge, deciding whether your explanation is sufficient. Instead of equal footing, you elevate their opinion above your own clarity. This dynamic can subtly change how future interactions unfold, making you more likely to explain again the next time. Over-explaining is often driven by discomfort with silence. Silence can feel risky. It creates space for reaction, disagreement, or tension. Filling that space with words feels safer. But silence isn't an enemy. Silence lets your words settle, it gives them weight. When you rush to fill it, you reduce their impact. There's also an emotional toll. Over-explaining can leave you feeling exposed, drained, or even resentful. You give more than necessary and receive little in return. That imbalance builds frustration over time, especially when you realize that the extra explanation didn't change the outcome anyway. Clarity doesn't require volume. A single, well-placed sentence often communicates more strength than a paragraph of reasoning. When your words are concise, they sound intentional. They signal that you trust what you're saying. That trust is felt, not argued. This doesn't mean withholding information or being vague. It means matching the response to the moment. Answer the question that was asked, not the one you're afraid they might ask next. Let people request more information if they need it. When they do, you're responding to genuine curiosity, not preemptive insecurity. Over-explaining can also blur boundaries. When you explain personal decisions excessively, you invite others into spaces they don't belong. A simple statement can protect your boundary. An extended explanation often weakens it. Boundaries don't need to be justified to be valid. Learning to stop over-explaining requires self-trust. Trust that your words are enough. Trust that not everyone needs full access to your reasoning. Trust that clarity doesn't require consensus, it also requires comfort with being misunderstood. Not everyone will interpret your words the way you intend, and that's okay. Trying to control interpretation through explanation is exhausting and rarely successful. Your responsibility is to speak clearly, not to manage every reaction. When you reduce over-explaining, something interesting happens. Conversations slow down. People listen more carefully. Questions become more thoughtful. Your presence feels steadier. That's because your communication now carries finality instead of hesitation. In the end, over-explaining weakens your position not because explanations are wrong, but because excess signals uncertainty. Strength in communication comes from knowing when enough has been said and having the discipline to stop there. When you trust your words to stand without support, others are far more likely to respect them. Filling silence out of discomfort is one of the most common ways people lose control in communication, often without realizing it. Silence creates space, and space can feel threatening when you're unsure how the other person will respond. The pause after you speak can feel heavy, as if something is expected of you. So you talk. You add clarifications, soften your statement, or walk it back entirely. What feels like easing tension in the moment often weakens your message and hands control to the other person. Silence isn't empty. It's active. It gives your words time to land. When you interrupt that process by speaking again too quickly, you prevent your message from being fully received. Instead of letting the other person process what you said, you redirect attention back to your own uncertainty. The focus shifts from the content of your message to your need for reassurance. Discomfort with silence usually comes from fear. Fear of disagreement. Fear of rejection. Fear of being judged. That fear convinces you that silence means failure, when in reality silence often means consideration. The other person may be thinking, recalibrating, or deciding how to respond. By filling that silence, You remove their responsibility to engage and take it back onto yourself. There's also a subtle signal sent when you rush to fill quiet moments. It suggests that you're uncomfortable holding your ground. Even if your words were clear, the additional talking can make it seem like you're unsure. People read this instinctively. They sense when someone is waiting for validation instead of standing by their statement. Filling silence can also undo boundaries. You may state a limit, pause, and then feel the urge to explain why you said it. That explanation, especially if unprompted, turns a boundary